Red Dead Redemption 2's world is as monumental and mixed as it is meticulous, and eclipses nearly every other video game in terms of aesthetic design. Red Dead beautifully depicts the burgeoning of modern America, and while the infrastructure and technology around the country have increased tenfold, the morals and priorities of the land of the free remain chillingly stagnant. These 5 states are an illustrious tapestry, magnificently woven from various fabrics. Sheet white peaks soothe your soul as you trot across them, contrasting a bright crispness with the sky's blue. Vast, verdant heartlands, stretching out as far as the eye can see, convey the landscape's scope with no crags or trees to skew your perception. The arid plains of an unforgiving valley are littered with both bone and bush alike, with the undertones that a certain cowboy will change these lands forever when his time comes. Murky, overrun swamplands that holds as many mysteries as it does threats. This gorgeous assortment of biomes blends seamlessly together, which can only be achieved with scope and ambition. But what would these tapestries be without their crown jewels woven into them as their focal points? These are the towns of Red Dead Redemption 2, and they're outstanding. Not since Novigrad have I come across civilizations with so much life and intricacy. The quaint sleepiness of Valentine, a small community yet so impactful I can recall the purpose of every building along the main street. Rhodes' scorched earth and dust path, like a picturesque town of a 60s western, with a pristine main town quality to it, but it's only the 3rd most relevant across the campaign, though I suppose that's subjective, but so is everything I've ever said in these reviews. The hopeless soot-clouded skies of Ansburg, where dreams go to choke and die, and the beginning of the end for humanity is in full smog ahead mode. Finally, the 8th wonder of the civilized world, Saint Denis, with bustling streets, weaving alleys, shady districts, and baroque manners, all under the guise of a historic New Orleans. You'd think that all the effort went into making this one city fantastic, but it's spread thoroughly throughout every inch of this frontier. Red Dead 2 manages to capture organicism excellently, never divulging into a checklist. Mostly, but we'll get to that. The game never becomes about markers and checklists, which I have nothing against in video games, and it can be pretty cathartic, but it admittedly does hurt immersion. Arthur will sketch locations of interest and Easter eggs on his map as a substitute. While they don't serve any real purpose as they've already been found, I cannot understate how cool that is. Though I suppose it speaks more to Arthur's character, so I'd best not dwell on it. However, the collectibles don't really feel thematic with the world in the aforementioned open world games. For example, collecting 50 scrap letters in GTA 5 felt haphazard and random, like having a collectible for the sake of having a collectible. Red Dead's side activities feel like an extension of its world. Hunting, gambling, bounties, robberies, filling out your compendium of weapons and fauna. These all feel like things Arthur would want to do just as much as me, as well as being thematically sound with the outlaw camping lifestyle, so they're a direct result of living in this world, rather than having objectives for padded playtime. Still, what would fantastic wilderness and cities be without people to populate them? I'm not talking about the supporting cast, as they would be covered in a story review. I mean the extras. There is no other game with extras this fleshed out, all thanks to the tireless efforts put into these world events. While each one is just a slight distraction and never intrusive to your current objective, it's nothing short of a miracle just how much impact they can make on you. These events can raise mysteries, tell self-contained or sprawling stories, or could just be downright shocking. Each one also has a level of player interactivity. Arthur can be courteous, abusive, or even murderous in every one of these tales of the plains. And there are characters in these stories with no effect on the overarching plot that's more memorable than the characters from a 60-hour RPG. Mickey from Valentine, Lily May's boyfriend, Blind Man Cassidy, the guy who gets his skull caved in by a horse. In just a few seconds, they made more of an impact on me than anyone in a game like Shin Megami Tensei 5 ever could, and were allowed to become protagonists in their own story intertwined with Arthur's. It really proves that there is no good excuse for just putting the work in. It's not just how Arthur interacts with these folk, the game also determines how the game interacts with you. If you fail to clean yourself, you'll be met with disgust. If you try to speak to someone whilst dried mud cakes your clothes and crusts along your face, forcing drastic measures to be taken at some points in the story. The honor system is also an impressive feat that determines how society views you, as a scum of the earth criminal or an outlaw with a heart of gold. It shows not only the effect you have on the world, but how the world will affect you in turn. My favourite thing about the NPCs of Red Dead is something totally unique to this game. People will just stand in their designated spots in most open world games until they die, but everyone's got a routine in Red Dead. I know it's not the first game to do that, but it's the first to do it with so many different people from so many walks of life, so it really paints a picture of a breathing world rather than one that revolves around the protagonist, which is impressive because in a third-person game, the world literally does revolve around the protagonist. Even when I'm sequestered up in the mountains, I can still vividly picture the beggars of Saint Denis, the fishermen of Le Gras, and the infected of Armadillo, all happening within a few minutes' ride of each other. Generally, in a world review, I would talk about the music, but I feel like Red Dead 2's music is more supportive of its campaign than its world. Free roam relies mainly on ambience, like Breath of the Wild, although Zelda has a few tracks for specific locations. That's more acceptable in a fantasy game, rather than a game that grovels to the altar of realism. Okay, even though I've just spent 1,000 words describing the perfection of this world, no world is perfect, and I do have some complaints. 2 minor and 1 major, but the major one doesn't really matter depending on how you look at it. My first minor complaint is the bounty system. When Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, a significant portion of the American workforce called in a sick day to play the game. The majority of these people did not do this to experience a new story written by the Hauser brothers, or immerse themselves in the sun-soaked metropolis of Los Santos. They did it to go on a murderous rampage. Yes, these have been a staple of Rockstar games and were why everyone at school wanted to play Grand Theft Auto 5 when I was 10? Jesus, my generation is screwed. But a lot of those sales came from a lust for genocide, so I'm baffled as to why it's so heavily discouraged in Red Dead 2. Personally, I've never felt the need to commit a spree killing, but I have accidentally hit someone with my horse and received a bounty. A bounty that would not fade after death until I paid it off. It's also a blow to realism, but I guess it's also a sad metaphor for capitalism. I guess a man's life truly is worth $15. If I get to go on a rampage, authorities should hunt me, but should there really be lasting consequences if I bump into someone? My other issue, and this could actually be pretty big, is how during free roam your eyes are drawn to the mini-map to know where you're going, so only 1/16 of the screen is used, and it's objectively the ugliest part. I would have adored an option to have the translucent trail from animal tracks guide you along the path. It would have taken away from the realism, but it would put your vigorous work on full display. Now for the major issue, and it might not matter to some people who watch this video, but still. Red Dead Online completely ruins all of Rockstar's hard work. The organicism of the world is dried up and replaced with a slathering of rinse-and-repeat quests with zero emotional weight and a broken economy. It proves it doesn't matter how beautiful you make your world, any business executive can come up and mess it up for you. Red Dead 2 doesn't have a consistent atmosphere. Usually that's a problem, but the reason that it's not consistent is that it can hit both extremes. The hush-hush of a wooded forest, punctuated by the cracking of branches or singing of birds, to the boisterous, crowded streets of a megalopolis, where grime is carved into every nook and cranny, and class divide hangs over the streets like a fog, and that's not even mentioning the toxic fumes that spout from the cylinders of progress. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that comes along once in a generation. able to reach such a level of perfection that few can even challenge and only a thimbleful can surpass. Red Dead Redemption 2 depicts a country at a tumultuous crossroads, on the precipice of a significant shift in lifestyle. Still, this game gives us a world that will forever stand unshaken.